So VRS, it's variable rate shading, and it's a technique that helps gain more performance in rendering. So basically, the top down of it is there's a lot of places on screen that aren't very important or that have less detail. You know, stuff like you might have depth of field kicking in, or it might be a part of the screen that's not lit up, or it's in shadow a little too much. So the idea is that you can, with VRS, you can control the shading rate of each pixel or each group of pixels.
Okay.
It can be like 2x2, 4x4. It kind of depends on the
Sure.
hardware support, but yeah, it's huge for especially as more games are starting to try to get closer to native 4K. It's a pretty huge win. I mean, I think I remember seeing Gears of War got like 15 or 20% gain on their
That's
frame time,
amazing.
so that's huge.
Yeah,
Like
that is huge. Yeah.
that's the game changer.
We are a podcast talking about the game industry and looking at it from both a business perspective as well as from an engineering perspective. We're going to be covering a few things today for you guys. We're going to cover some game news, some things that are happening in the industry, game releases, so some cool games that are coming out, and then also we're going to break down a game. We're going to look at a couple of games today, actually, and we're going to kind of see what we think of them again from a business perspective and an engineering perspective. I'm Jim Welch. I'm your host. I run the Devhouse agency and Something Special Games.
And I'm Ray. I'm a AAA programmer who focuses a lot on rendering and low-level systems. So I'm gonna be the one to put us to sleep this time. Probably we're gonna be talking about cool stuff, and I'm gonna come in like, oh man, if you shift some bits around.
I think you'd be surprised how many people are into that stuff. I think
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Well, man, hop in my DMs. Let's talk about some
Yeah.
sometime.
Get some YouTube shorts,
Yeah.
We're good. So yeah, let's talk about some interesting things that have happened over the last week. Not this particular bit of news isn't like brand new. It's been out for a couple weeks, but still worth mentioning. Unity 6 has gone into preview. So if you're a user of Unity, there's some cool stuff going on with that. Specifically, I'm pretty excited about their new mobile support. So as a studio, we sometimes need to build web support applications, and we always have to use some kind of obscure or smaller game engine that supports mobile web. Typically Play Canvas, which is a fine tool, but it's not quite as robust as Unity. So I'm super excited about that feature for Unity.
Wait, hold up. So back it up. What do you mean you have to use a different engine for?
So
mobile?
yeah, like if we want to do like a WebGL build, like a game that runs on the web, it totally can use Unity as long as it's desktop. But if you try to do like open up that same web page on a mobile phone, you can technically kind of force it to work, but Unity officially wasn't supporting it. So you get like this message that you had to like override that's like, this is not supported. And then if it broke, you're kind of out of luck, right? So
I gotcha.
yeah. So there's some game engines like Play Canvas. So if you're not someone who likes Unity or want other solutions, Play Canvas is a good one for that. They specialize in WebGL games supported on mobile. So but yeah, so I don't know if I know you're not like a huge Unity user. I don't know if there's anything coming out for Unity that you heard about that you're excited for.
No, not much. I haven't used Unity probably in about a year or two, and even then it was just kind of casually like, hey, I'm gonna hop in and do this thing real quick.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for that.
Maybe like 10 years ago, I used to work on something called XNA, which was like the Unity competitor at the time.
Yeah,
it was like very programming focused. So of course, didn't quite gain the legs that it did with something that was a little more visual and a little more tangible.
Yeah. I briefly tried coding in React once, and it has no visualization. So I grew up on Unity. I learned to program in Unity, so not having that visual element for me was like crippling. But I know Unreal is also released 5.4. I imagine you're probably closer to Unreal with your kind of AAA.
A tiny bit. I should be closer. That definitely. I actually haven't touched Unreal since Unreal 3.
You and your custom engines, right?
Yeah. Like I'm always like the old man, like the grumpy old dude on the lawn, like build your own engine kits. Like that's kind of what I'm always pushing for. So I don't use commercial engines too much, but I did see a line note on the latest Unreal, and that they have basically a software-based VRS, and I got super excited because I'm all about VRS.
So what's VRS?
So VRS, it's variable rate shading, and it's a technique that helps gain more performance in rendering. So basically, the top down of it is there's a lot of places on screen that aren't very important or that have less detail. Stuff like you might have depth of field kicking in, or it might be a part of the screen that's not lit up, or it's in shadow a little too much. So the idea is that with VRS, you can control the shading rate of each pixel or each group of pixels. So let's say there's a darker area that's most of it's black or close to black. you can lower at a much lower resolution, and you'll be way faster because you're rendering less pixels. So
And it's not like a per model; it's like per pixel. Like you can.
it's per like groups of pixels. Like
Okay.
it can be like 2x2, 4x4. It kind of depends on the
Sure.
hardware support, but yeah, it's huge for especially as more games are starting to try to get closer to native 4K. I mean, to waste a lot of time on stuff that's maybe around the edges of the screen or in the corners or again in shadow, stuff like that. It's really frustrating to have to like render those pixels, even though nobody can see them or even though they're not going to be much. So you can kind of like use VRS to pass this mask along, and now you don't have to render those, or you can render them lower resolution, and it's a pretty huge win. I mean, I think I remember seeing Gears of War got like 15 or 20% gain on their frame time, so that's huge.
Yeah,
like
that is huge.
That's a game changer. So that's actually an article that I recommend a lot. Is there's one out there on VRS and how they used it in Gears 5 now. How many Gears?
Okay, I have no idea.
I think we just call it Gears 5. Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
So it's a paper that I really like, a white paper that I really enjoy reading. So
Sweet.
Let's make sure to like link it if somebody's interested in like performance. For that.
Yeah,
But,
we'll be sure to link it in the comments so people can check that out.
and if the line item in Unreal is that it's VRS support on a software level. So even if the hardware doesn't support VRS, you can still find it. So yeah,
nice.
you know what I'm
Okay.
saying? So like things that couldn't support, which most graphics cards have VRS support, but the ones that don't, right, that you're still going to be struggling. So yeah, it's really cool that they were able to implement this in a way that more hardware can use it, and I think you can even get a smaller tile size, so you don't have to trade off the quality as much, even though it's a very marginal quality trade-off. But yeah, it's a really cool line item. It's a really cool feature that they're going to be adding. So I saw that and I got excited.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know one of the projects we're working on is a really massive Unreal Engine world. One of the client that is working with us to build it wants a really, really large environment. We're basing off of real world locations, so we're taking satellite maps and do these really massive worlds, and constantly performance is a very important thing that we're constantly thinking about, and constantly there's some like really basic kind of more simple things like LODs, like that's great, but when you start to go like to that scale, you have to really start to do some crazy stuff. So
yeah, I mean, and the best optimization is just not doing something, right? So like not rendering those pixels or rendering less of them is
Right.
just a pure win.
Yeah. I know also from like if you're not building a game where you're too worried about optimization, or maybe it's a stylized game in Unreal, there is a lot more control now in 5.4 over kind of in-engine animation and rigging, which I thought that was pretty cool. Just from someone who, like, my background's in engineering and the startup kind of business side of things, and a bit of music, but never art. Like art's something that I'm not really proficient at, and so being able to like build a rig inside of the engine, so I don't necessarily have to hire someone who does rigging if it's basic, right? It's bipedal. We're doing a game right now with animals and quadrupeds, so this doesn't really help our current project, but bipedal is way more common, right? Most people have humans in their game, so it's awesome, and lots of squash and stretch stuff that you can do for more stylized things, and you can do group control. So normally when you build a very ultra basic rig, you're just grabbing almost like the hand and doing some IK things, but you can't really do control groups unless you have a more advanced setting. But actually Unreal's 5.4 releases more kind of like control groups, so you can like select a group of nodes and kind of move those as a group. So yeah, if you're trying to build cinematics or just kind of move your characters without specializing in that, super cool. Also, this reminds me too, there's some really sweet like movement lerping stuff, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like they have this cool array of like predetermined kind of weights that the character takes on, and it'll naturally like transition into them.
So it's like a smoother animation blending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like they have all these like built-in blends, and like it just seems super, super cool. Again, like what my team's largely working on right now is animals, and so we can't use it, but I'm sure in the near future, like quadrupeds is like got to be the next
Maybe
thing.
you should just use it anyway. Can you imagine the nightmare fuel of blending a human skeleton onto a deer?
Yeah.
With like four,
Oh, yeah.
like a quadruped.
I forget the name of the game, but I was showing it to the team. There's a game, it's like a silly game where you either play as deer or as a hunter, and basically you try to hide amongst NPC deers, and if they find you, the hunter wins. If they don't find you, then you get to like hunt the hunter, but you're like running around, and I don't know, it's I'm pretty sure they go bipedal with their deer. It's fun.
Yeah.
So those are some things that we're excited about for these new engine releases. I think it's also going to be interesting to talk about some games that are coming out. I know
games.
games are fun. So something that I didn't necessarily have on our list to talk about today, but I want to give a special shout out to Hades 2. I think early access is where it's at right now, but Hades is a badass game, and the first one was amazing. Second one is
ruined
out.
my life and most of my relationships with Hades too. That game is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm super excited for that. Supergiant's an awesome team. So
oh my god, they can do no wrong.
Yeah, I like just hit after hit. Yeah, amazing team. So yeah, that's a fun one to check out. Something different though that I tried out that recently came out was Homeworld. It's the third one. I've never played Homeworld.
I've never played Homeworld either.
Or to be frank, I've never heard of it. There's 3 of them, so I'm like, no, I'd never heard of Homeworld. And what's crazy is like I love RTS games, and so like StarCraft 2, StarCraft 1, Red Alert, all the weird Red Alert spinoffs. I played those like crazy growing up.
And we live in the same city as the people who own it. So
yeah, I under a rock. I don't know what's going on. So
I be your rock sometime, man. I'll never get to kick it with you at the rock.
Right? Yeah, we just
underneath.
Well, I got my rock over here, and there's like a long wait list, and so you know,
wow, it's like that.
So I'll put you on the rock list.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah,
all right. That's what I'm gonna get.
But yeah, no. So I dropped in today, started playing through it, and for me, the biggest thing that drew my attention was the immersion. Like being in more of like a 3-dimensional space compared to like a StarCraft took some getting used to. So like I'm still trying to get my like space legs, I guess, to navigate the environment and feel comfortable like I did in like, you know, Command and Conquer and StarCraft. But the voice acting and just audio in general is just phenomenal. And like the writing was really good already, like the parts that I've gotten through, and just the overall atmosphere. Like I immediately like was sucked in, and I was like, this is some cool sci-fi stuff. Like I want to play more of this game. So yeah, I'm still too new to give like a super deep, review of it, but I think it's definitely like, as an RTS fan, I was really impressed by the immersiveness, and I think people should check it out. So,
yeah, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah. I think they just did such a beautiful job with the world that they built, and super cool thing that I'm excited to go play more of it now. So
is there like any I guess features that stood out to is it that you like it because it's just like a really solid RTS that's kind of hits all the spots, or there's something like unique about it or something that you haven't seen before in other
for me, I mean, like the multi dimensions, you know, because even back to like Warcraft, you know, like the early Warcrafts or RTSs, like all of those are on the ground and you're walking around and it's like that 2D plane. So for me, this was kind of the first time I've tried something that played with that 3D space, which that's new. I don't know if I like it or dislike it yet. I'm just trying to get the hang of it. But I think I'm one of those weird people who played all the StarCraft 2 campaigns. Like a lot of people just go into multiplayer and that's it. But like I enjoyed going through the campaigns. And so like this campaign feels really strong out the gate. And so I think that, you know, even though it's not the only game doing campaigns in RTS, they're doing it really well. So that stood out to me. I mean, otherwise though, like all the kind of basic functionalities of RTSs, they're there, you know, like the same kind of commands that you'd expect in the way to control your troops and upgrade and build units. That's all there. But from a story perspective, I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. What's coming out this week that you're excited about?
So this came out last week, and I know that we're changing the show's format, and this is not going to help the whole "I'm not a furry" thing. But I got this game recommended to me called Rabbit and Steel, and I apologize because I am probably going to call it like Iron and Bunny and all kinds of like. I'm going to get.
I'm pretty sure I said Hell's Divers over and over again last time we talked about Hell Divers. Hell's Divers. Yeah. So it's all right. You have permission to misspeak.
Well, I appreciate that because it's going to happen either way. Rabbit and Steel. It's a game that I tripped across. I think I just got randomly recommended to me, and I am loving it. It's kind of like an MMO simulator, right? It's just kind of like boss battle after boss battle after boss battle, and you do like old school RPG raid mechanics, you know, like stand in the circle, stand outside of the circle, break the tether, stand next to your partner, stuff like that. So it's that in a roguelike shell. So you go through, you kill random bosses, and the whole thing is, it's not so much about killing the boss, because the bosses it's kind of bullet helly. Okay. So I mean that's pretty standard, but the hard part is the raid mechanics. So like it's a 4-player co-op game with online co-op as well. And as you're doing these fights, it's like, oh, well, now you have to stand in these numbered circles, or oh, now you have to stand next to your partner, or you'll hurt them, or you have to split up because there's going to drop an AoE on you, and it won't hurt you, but it'll hurt everyone around you. So it's like it just throws these mechanics after you over and over and over again that you're learning on the fly. And
are you like reading the boss patterns, or is it like actually telling you like, now do this, now do that?
It's sometimes both. It's mostly reading the boss patterns, but sometimes a more complex mechanic, it will say like there's one boss that it will freeze so you can't move for a couple seconds, and then it'll display a bunch of patterns on the screen basically, and it's like, I'm going to drop AoEs on here in 10 seconds, but I'm not going to keep the reminder on screen. So you have to like, okay, wait, I memorize, okay, well, it's going to be this, that, and then it goes away and you continue the fight, and then 10 seconds later you're like, oh, I forgot completely about it, and you die. Yeah, at least that's been my experience.
That's pretty clever. Yeah, I like that.
So I mean, it was described to me as very Final Fantasy 14-esque, because I do see a lot of those, like and I would agree. I played a bunch of Final Fantasy 14, and a lot of these mechanics are the same in terms of like stand in the circle, flip your color, or get the negative polarity next to the positive, just like weird little stuff like that. But the game also explains absolutely nothing to you. So it really is, it feels like old school raiding for the first time, of like, I'm going to fight this thing and I have no idea what's going on, and we're just going to panic and figure it out on the fly. And like the kind of like figuring that out with your teammates on the go, it makes a lot of these like really emergent moments that are really, really fun.
That sounds awesome.
And it's I actually hadn't heard of this developer before. I forget their name, unfortunately, and that's terrible for me.
We'll put it in the
comments
Dev, or in the description.
Mina Dev, I think, is her Twitter or something like that. But yeah, it's a solo dev, and this is one of those things as an indie dev I think you'll appreciate. This is their second game, and their first game, it's like, and this is where again I'm terrible with names. It's like metal. It's very similar to this one. It's like metal and
Metal Cat.
Spell. It's like metal and spell or something like that. And it looks very identical to this, but you can see how they took Rabbit and Steel, and it's the evolution of the previous game, because it's a lot of the same, like similar mechanics, but it's more bullet helly. A lot of very similar mechanics. So like as an indie dev, I know that you appreciate like, hey, I made this one thing and now I'm going to evolve it into something else for a DLC or a sequel, or even something maybe completely different, right? Like you can definitely see that they are reusing a lot of either tech or mechanics or design, and I really like to see that and kind of compare the two. It's neat.
That's a good like just kind of side note is it's really compelling, when you finish a game or like you've worked on a project a really long time, there's that desire like to do something totally different and just like to get something fresh. But if you can take your last project and evolve it, then you can like build on all of that investment that you spent. So I think that's really cool that developer had the strength to continue on what they were already doing, because that's a big value, and it takes discipline, I think, to do that.
No, absolutely.
Every time I finish a game, I want to make something crazy different after that.
You also have to like have discipline to do things kind of correctly as you're implementing them, right? Because like if you're those hacks and those shortcuts that you may have taken to save a little time, like 5 years later or whatever, 3 years later, when you're making the second game like that, that's going to hurt even more,
right?
Like all the corners you cut coming back to get you.
Yeah, and especially if you're like a much better developer at that point, you're like, oh my god, why did I do this? And then you want to rewrite all the code. So yeah, that's a good point. Sweet. So yeah, those are some cool games coming out. There's a little free game that I quickly played today that I want to give a quick shout out. So Tiny Robots, I played it on PC. It definitely feels more like it's on mobile. Like you can also get it on mobile. So I recommend it on mobile. It feels like a mobile game even when you're playing on PC. The reason I want to talk about this one is it's free. So that's awesome. If you have Amazon games, so Amazon Prime gives you access to Amazon games. You can go pick it up for free. What drew my attention is I love those little like kind of like isometric baby worlds where you get to like see all around it. It's just this little like diorama basically. And each one's a puzzle. So like you get this tiny little diorama that maybe in 5 minutes you can solve the puzzle for that specific diorama. And then you go to the next one and you go to the next one. And
that sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's a very, and like, it has a very like adventure game, like old school point and click adventure game vibe. Cause you spin the world and then you see someone you want and you click in to zoom in, and then you click again to open it. And then you're like, oh, I got an item. Where do I use this item? And then you scroll around the world. So yeah, cute game, worth like, if you're into puzzle games, I really like the minimalistic design for it.
My brain is stuck on this, but this looks, and it's stuck on, I'm going to get because I will keep wanting to say The Witcher, and I know it's not The Witcher.
It's just like The Witcher.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, but this looks like a tiny, cute, what was that Jonathan Blow game on the island?
Oh,
like
yeah.
The Witness?
Yes, The Witness.
The Witness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, this looks like a cute The Witness.
Yeah,
on an island.
And there is little puzzles. Yeah, 2D puzzles also. So yeah, you're doing the 3D puzzles, and then every level there's also a little 2D puzzle as well. And yeah, I just love it because you can like, it's like you just get through a little level and it's like a little bite-sized thing. You can put it down and pick it back up. So yeah, fun game. So I think that's good for this week's game releases. We are going to kind of dig into a couple of games that have been announced for a little bit, but I think they're really interesting and they're worth us to kind of like break down as our segment is called. So let's look at Superliminal first. We'll watch the trailer, and then as we're watching, we'll kind of talk about it. So
I love Superliminal so much.
Okay, this is bad of me. I can't recall. It's not out yet, right?
No, it's out.
It is out. Okay, I haven't played it yet. So
oh my gosh, it's amazing. I love like the really like mind brain fucky type stuff.
Yeah,
so like this was right up my alley. And especially I'm not huge on storyline in games, and there's very little story here. It's just go do the thing. Man, I love this. It was so cool.
Yeah, because I've seen this trailer before, and I've been thinking about this just from the trailer. And so I guess I'll go from like I haven't played it, but just my initial reaction to this when I saw it, immediately I was just like, how did they do that? Like I immediately thought as like an engineer and like as a game developer, and I was like, that is so cool. But from like kind of the business side of making a game, like building a game and deciding like who your market is, what's really cool about this is like anytime you have a really hooky, catchy mechanic, you can really push a game through that. So if someone sees the kind of cool mechanic of like, oh, when you grab it, suddenly it like breaks the kind of perspective and experience, it's really clear. It's like that is something you can like really like hold on to. So when you're thinking about the game, you immediately, connect that mechanic, and it's so unique that you aren't like, oh yeah, it's like that other game. I don't know. It makes you want to like check it out. So I think there's huge value in finding a mechanic unique like that.
Yeah, big time. And for those who the uninitiated of Superliminal, it's a first person kind of like adventure game, I guess I would kind of call it. You just kind of wake up in a test room, kind of similar to Portal, and
right? Yeah,
you're just kind of trying to make your way out, and everything's very like it's a bunch of perspective puzzles essentially. So you pick something up, you move it. If you make it look like it's small, then all of a sudden it'll grow and be large. Or you can change a 3-dimensional object into a 2-dimensional object. Or sometimes I think there was one puzzle where it's like I needed a ladder to climb out of it, and there was no ladder, and it was like I had to like stand at a certain point in the room to make the shadows look like they were a ladder. And then it became a ladder, and then I could climb up it. So it was just like a lot of like bending reality, mind warping type stuff that I love.
Yeah.
And it's done really well. And I'm with you. Like when I played this, the first thing I thought, it was like, man, how would I do this? And then I realized I am not a gameplay programmer, and I have no idea how I would do it. Like even now in thinking about it, I'm like, man, how would I, like, I guess I would take the distance between the two and then use that to derive some kind of scale when you like release the object and then apply it. But
yeah, this one kind of breaks my brain a little bit. Like I didn't want to cheat and see if I could find talks on how they did it. But yeah, I mean the idea that like
lots of portals, I mean the portal thing is pretty obvious that hey, you look at this direction, I'm going to activate this portal, and now you're just going to teleport to some other like smaller instance of a room or something like that.
Yeah, anything where you can look away, or like you can just kind of swap assets. The ones that are perspective based, where you grab it and then suddenly let go, is bigger. I mean, yeah, it's like you have that game object at a certain size without cutting or looking away. Somehow it's bigger.
It's the smooth. It's like
the smoothness.
It's the smoothness, right? Because like doing that, like blocky or glitchy or buggy, like that makes sense. But everything's so seamless. And then for a game that's so physics based like this, I don't really remember any bugs the whole time I played.
Wow.
Nothing obvious.
Did you get to all the way to the end? Did you finish?
I did that thing where I got like 75% of the way and then saw something shiny and went to go play Dota instead. Yeah. So, but I got close. Like,
it gives me like a strong like Stanley Parable vibe.
Very much so. Yeah.
Cool. So. Cool physics perspective stuff. Yeah. Super cool. So yeah, Superliminal. Ray vouches for it as an awesome game. I vouch for it as a really amazing. Coming up with a mechanic like that is cool. It's hard to do, but then like actually being able to pull it off, like, yeah.
Man, I would love to see I don't want to, I'm going to sound like a hater here, but I would love to see the code base, because I'm sure it's just a bunch of edge case type stuff. Right? Like the puzzles are so unique. There's no way that there's one system driving all this, right? It's got to be like level 2 angle 5 puzzle. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would love to see the code base. I'm sure it's very like specific to a lot of the things that they designed here. I hope.
Sure.
And if not, then I would love to learn, because obviously this dude's on another level than I am.
Yeah, super super cool.
Mhm.
And I guess like in that same like mind bending kind of perspective, Viewfinder is another game that that does huge things with perspective. You know, I've seen lots of people just mind blown by this game. I am one of those as well. This one to me, like, had at least initially, same thing. I mean, I think this fits in the same category of like, hey, you came up with a really clever mechanic, and now people can easily share that and tell, like, oh, did you see that game where you can take a photo and then you can put that photo into the real world, and now it's 3D mesh and you can walk around like that. I don't know if you'd ever want to like build a game purely just thinking about, I want to come up with a crazy mechanic. It almost feels like it should be organic. But either way, like if you can come up with a concept like this, lean into it in your trailers and in your content, because that's what people will remember.
Yeah, I could see some of these games coming from bugs. You know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah,
working on something
yeah.
else and you accidentally scaled your thing wrong. And you're like, wait a second.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point, because sometimes you do something weird and you're like, that was actually kind of fun, and then you start to play with it. How do you think you would build this feature? The kind of photo turns into mesh, like, I guess is the best way I describe it. I don't know.
That is tough. I haven't watched this trailer a ton, so the only thing I know is like you've got your camera, you take a picture, and then you can basically turn it into something real.
Yeah, so it's like you have, like, you take the photo, and then as you're holding it, you can basically like release it, or like be like, all right, now it's part of the world, and again seamlessly. That's the magic, is that, you know, watch here. Actually, yeah, it'll show you there. Take the picture, and now they have that, and the moment and then it's just there.
Oh man, just shooting from the hip. I imagine that like the camera would have to create some kind, like you've got some kind of volume, and you're saying anything within this volume, I'm basically going to take its geometry and replicate it in some way.
Yeah.
But the perspective side of that, like doing that at the same time, that I don't know.
That's a good point though. It's like, but I wonder if you'd have to slice the world, like have a way to slice mesh up really easily, because your picture's there. So you just, you take,
almost certainly.
You're like, okay, let me sample this world. Let me slice it from here. I just duplicate that and then delete the 2D frame, and then it's there. This seems like it would cause nightmare bugs. It'd be so hard to balance.
Yeah, but that's also kind of the fun in these games, is like sometimes the bugs are fun and people like them.
Right.
When they come like this, right? When it's like, I made 1,000 potatoes or whatever, and now I can't get out of this room because I'm stuck because there's too many potatoes. And I took a picture of potatoes on accident, and now I'm stuck in the potato room. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's another podcast episode where you talked about potatoes. I'm thinking you like potatoes.
There was a potato.
You were inspired.
There was a potato in a game. There were many potatoes. Yeah. In a game I worked on once, and I can't get the potato thing out.
Well, I even think Portal 2, was it one of the Portal games? I thought, or one of those has
some kind of vegetable
potato guy.
Was it potato?
I thought so. I don't know. Now I'm gonna have to look it up after this. But talking potatoes, So this week, kind of diving into these like perspective puzzles. They are really really cool, and I think the takeaway from a business perspective again is like, if you find a really unique mechanic, it's like, you can make an action adventure game where you run around swinging a sword. That can be really compelling. It can be a ton of fun. It's harder to sell that because it's like, well, how is yours better?
Is yours different?
Yeah, like
especially in a world of Game Pass and like independent developers and stuff like that, where they're just, everyone takes their idea and runs with it.
Yeah.
How do you stand out?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you could say, well, if you're too unique, a publisher or somebody might say, well, like, what can I compare this to see how it's going to perform? But on the other hand, if you're just like everybody else, it's like, like right now we're doing a kind of survivor like game. And one of the challenges is there's a lot of asset flips in that genre. And so like we're part of a sea of games like that. And so it's like, well, how do you, we're similar so people get it, but it almost hurts it because it's like, there's a bunch of bad games in that genre. If you're one of these kind of games, no one's like Viewfinder or Superliminal, like you are you, and so like that's so powerful. Yeah,
it's kind of like when people are in a rock band and somebody asks like, oh yeah, what kind of music do you play? And it's a 3-paragraph ChatGPT essay because nobody for some reason can just say, oh, I play rock. Like nobody says that. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, and you can't, and it's like embarrassing to say you're like anyone else. That's funny. It's like really unique about music. It's like not cool to be like, oh yeah, we sound like this band, Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, so I think each episode we're going to come with you with updates and new games that we kind of evaluate, and then kind of games we dive into and look at it from both a kind of business perspective as well as engineering perspective. I think that'll wrap for today. But appreciate you all joining in. Make sure you follow our socials, subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you next time.